So, first thing, I've got this, I made this years ago. Let's see if it works the way I remember it working. Basically, it's a different way of molding leather, where you can actually use a form that you pre-made for it. It takes a little bit to get it all lined up. But we're doing this first because this is going to take a couple days to dry. And if you're going to make multiples of something, or if it's something like this where it's a possibility of making several of them, making wooden forms like this can be worthwhile. But basically, I'm just driving it down on there, and then to flatten it all the way down, I've just got these wing nuts to tighten up on some carriage bolts. So if you have a case that you want to make regularly and make shaped cased items like this, it's just that's a block of leather that I made the right size. And that's easy because I've got scrap leather laying about. Just glue layers together, grind it, shape it, cut it however you want it to be. And then this was cut out and all the edges routed round around it. This is a engineered decking piece or something. I don't remember what that stuff's called. It's basically a pressed composite of wood pulp and so on. And then a piece of plywood that I've got down there. It's all just scraps that I had laying around. From the leather to the pieces of wood. And yep, that's all there really is to that. We'll let that dry for a day or two. And I can work on some of the other pieces, and then we'll trim this to shape. Okay, I've got my pattern pieces here, and I got some pieces cut out. And I'll convert all this to more legible patterns whenever I post this up on my Etsy site. But this is the front that I just cased. It could probably be a little narrower in a couple spots, but we'll trim it after we've got it shaped. Then we have all these other pieces. So we've got two of these little pieces that are going to be for shaping the inner flap, which is going to be this piece. So that's those and that. We've got some straps. Two of them are going to be the belt loops on the back. And then we've got one that's going to be the closure strap that pulls down and has a teardrop shaped hole in it to actually close the flap on the main part of the pouch. This is going to be the back of it and the outer flap that goes over the top. And it's going to have a piece stitched on there for the closure. So I've used two different weights of leather here. The inner flap and the part that actually I made the cased pouch out of is probably about 6 ounce. This might be a little bit thinner because I used different pieces of leather out of scraps, basically. The main part of the case, the straps, these parts, because they need to be a little bit thicker, and the outer flap of the case is cut out of about 8 ounce leather. These belt loop straps are going to be riveted and stitched. So I'm going to punch some 1/8 inch holes to rivet those on with some big copper rivets. Well, small copper rivets really as far as copper rivets go. Big as far as most leatherworking rivets go. And this teardrop shaped hole, I'm going to punch one end out, and I can always make these larger. This is a number 6 punch, which is a 3/16, I believe. And then I can cut out from that. And for that, I like just using a flat wood carving chisel. This piece is going to be through the flap and stitched down, and then just stick out on the other end. So I want to go ahead and skive that bit, and I want to skive the ends that are flat, not the rounded ends, but the ends that are flat on these, because those are also going to be kind of inside the pouch. with the rounded end stuck to the outside, so that we don't have as many bumps inside the pouch. Older, drier pieces of leather can be tricky. Skiving. This piece that's going to be the inner flap is also going to be inside the pouch. Doesn't necessarily need it, but I'm going to go ahead and skive it too. And it's a lot nicer piece of leather. A little bit more lively feeling. Fresher, basically. And I'm not sure that the examples I've ever seen have had edges that were beveled, but I go ahead and bevel edges on everything just because I like finishing stuff up a little bit better. Now these pieces I'm actually punching through with an awl because I want to hit right at that corner, not go straight through, but go through at an angle. And then I can stitch that in at a right angle to the other piece. Okay, I did decide to just clip the corners off my closure strap on this pattern, and I did add that onto my pattern piece as well, clip the corners on it. So that'll keep those points from just spreading out and making the strap flare kind of at the end. So you just take those corners off a little bit. You could also round them out, but I haven't seen any examples where they were rounded out. Doesn't mean they don't exist. I haven't seen a lot of different cap pouches. And most of what I have seen has been reproductions. But anyway, yeah, just clip those corners off. That'll make it a lot nicer in the long run. And all these pieces, a whole cap box, is going to be dyed black. Now I don't have my shaped front piece because it's still drying. It's going to be a day or so in our humidity levels that we've got right now. So I'm going to go on and get more into finishing all these pieces first, because that part is going to be the one that sews on last. All of these pieces go together first. Bottle of black oil dye and just start dyeing stuff up. Probably including myself and everything around me. Now again, most examples I've seen have not been dyed on the inside, so I'm not going to bother with that. I also forgot that one other piece that I'm going to need is a little scrap of sheep shearling. It's about 2 inches long. This is just a chunk I cut off of something that I had laying around. It doesn't even need to be extraordinarily wide, and it doesn't need to be this thick of a nap, so I'm going to trim it down a bit. I'll do that over a trash can though, so not on camera, because otherwise I make a mess. And that was to brush off caps so that they didn't stick to your fingers. When you pull out one, you didn't want other ones stuck to it, so that would brush them off. It was the idea behind putting a little bit of wool in there. And that just glues in, kind of last step. But that's our other little piece that we needed. And we're going to put a clear coat finish on these. There's a clear coat finish booger in that. This is acrylic Resin. Originals would have been waxed. Resiline's easy. Does not need to be reapplied regularly. If you want to be super accurate though, you could probably use a mixture of beeswax and tallow, maybe some oil, and buff it really good. Or you could start with a hot stuffed leather that's already waxed and already black if you're making a bunch of these. I'm not, so I'm just making them out of scraps that I have in my scrap bin, which means I've got to dye them myself and finish them myself. Alright, so I'm kind of marking up my patterns as I go, so I can update them a little bit as I figure out exactly where I want some holes to be. But, yeah, we're working on it. Work in progress on the pattern. So these are some holes that are going to be for the rivets to attach the belt loop part to the back. We're going to have some actual holes for the rivets themselves. Then we're going to have some holes that are going to be for putting the strap through the back piece of leather. And we're going to take those and punch those out and then cut between them real quick like. And again, wood chisel is a great way to do that. I even could probably punch those just a little wider, but as long as I can force it through there, we're good. And just go until the hole lines up. And like I said, we're going to rivet, and then we're going to stitch, and then we're going to fold this down, and we're going to rivet and stitch that. Somewhere right around there. This doesn't need to stick down just a little bit further than maybe a 1/4 inch than that little point. So our holes need to be right about there. And on straps like that, I always want an extra hole on each side because I actually do a stitch outside of the strap if I'm going to stitch across it like that. That only really works at the end of a strap. Don't ever stitch across a strap when you're in the middle of it. You want to stitch around the edges, stitch just on the edges. Though, that is even a better way to attach these. But the originals were attached just by stitching straight on. So, I'm going to slick the edges just a bit on these. Not going to bother with anything complicated. Just take my slicker to it real quick while it's still kind of finished setting, just to smooth it out a little bit. Alright, grab a harness needle, some linen thread, and start stitching. You can do regular saddle stitch on these. I'm just going to do a single needle stitch. Just go back and forth and cover over it. It's a little harder to get a nice neat stitch than it is to do with the 2 needle. Let's pull that out because I don't need that in there just yet. Alright, so this fella's going to go on the inside here. And I'm not going to start at the end. I always never start right at the end of a stitch because I have to back over some stitches anyway. Might as well. And you don't end right where you start either. You go a few stitches over. And that way everything is locked in nice and tight. You got to pull a stitch loose to get any of the other stitches to loosen up. You got to actually pull one of them tighter. Okay, I am using some very small copper rivets on these. I think these are number 12. I think they're a gauge. I think the number goes up as they go thinner. I'd have to double check and be sure about that though, what size I've got here. Maybe it's a 14 because this is labeled as 14. And I know this is the setter for what I've got here. Yeah. So, yeah. Number 14 then that I've got. Leave a little bit sticking up whenever you trim it off. Just about the thickness of the shaft of the rivet itself. And then you use a little tool to peen it over. So we're going to stitch around that. Now you can mark holes where you're going to stitch. Let's see if I can punch it with the chisel. I could just do this with the awl, but if I punch it with the chisel, it's going to be easier. Hey, look at that. Right through. Nice. Alright, stitch those up same way. Okay, it looks like I lucked out, and when I marked the pattern on these pieces on the side of the inner flap, I made them just a little bit narrower than what this chisel does. I need 8 holes along there, spaced almost exactly what this chisel does. So we're just gonna use it. This is a stitching chisel pricking iron that Tandy used to sell, and I think they still sell versions of. I don't remember the distance on it though. I think it's a 3mm. I'm not positive. No, it looks like it's a 4. This one, it might be worth it to do with 2 needles, because these are a little tricky to line up. And a lot trickier to go back through once you've already got one line of stitches already tight. And I don't know what these little bits are actually called. They're kind of the sides. They're not gussets. They're shields, or they're to cover the edge so that it prevents rain or something like that from getting in. I think I'm going to call them mud flaps from now on. So if I keep calling these mud flaps, you'll know what I mean. Oh, and if any of y'all have lost the plot about why I did these and then started on this without finishing those belt loops, it's because I remembered that I need to sew this on before I close those belt loops down. Now you could attach this when you rivet that in. It could be riveted on as well. I don't see why not. It probably would help. I don't like it as well because I think the rivets need to be better covered than that. But like I said, I do need to stitch this on before I close these in and can't stitch easily in there. I am probably not going to do where it stitches all the way across, because I don't like stitching across straps. That just eliminates why that rivet is there in the first place, because that doesn't make it stronger if your weak point is a perforated strap right there. So again, if the originals are like that, I'm not doing that because it's wrong. Okay, now we got this on here. This is going to just about line up with the ends on our straps down there. That'll be about right. Maybe we'll go a little higher, just a little bit. No, it needs to be right about there. That looks right up here. So, line it up with the ends of our straps there. And I'll work near the edge of the bench. Let's put some holes in the center. That'll hold it all together. And we can put some holes to the side if we wanted. But it really doesn't need a lot. Again, reproductions that I've seen, it does just stitch across and stitch across the straps, but that's a terrible thing to do to a strap. That'll make a weak spot in it. And like I said, you're stitching on the inside of the rivets. You're making a weak spot in like the worst place possible. So I don't want to do that. I don't even want to do that if it was historically accurate, which I don't think it was, because they were hand stitching them and the reproductions are done on machines. And I can see why you would do that if you're stitching on a machine. It would be quick and easy. But as the owner of a machine, who is not using it right now because this is the better way to do this, I'm going to do it the better way. So what I think I should do is stitch a line right outside of this. It really only has to hold that flap in, so I guess it doesn't need to be super strong. I just don't want to like I said, destroy the strength of my belt loops, which do have to be super strong, because those are always going to be getting caught on something, the whole pouch, and that all the whatever weight winds up pulling on those straps. Okay, so there we go. That's attached on. It's there, there, and there on the outside edges of these, and right in the center. Now we'll go ahead and fold these down. Gotta take a lighter to these pieces real quick. Now, in modern thread, of course, it shrinks. This is linen thread. It actually kind of burns away a little bit. We are gonna put the heads of the rivets on the outside here, so that's gonna be nice and neat. Now, where it's gonna be rubbing against the person, or where they're gonna be able to see it. There they are. I had to find my burrs. Same thing. This Heritage setter is actually really good. I think Heritage is Weaver's brand, if I remember. Maybe not. Anyway, it's working really well for me. So I'm going to glue this piece in. And then it's time to wait for the other piece to dry so I can finish it up. Dries out. And this is going to just glue on right about here. Just a little underneath these little things. It should be just inside the pouch when we get it done. Alright, we will drop that in about like that. Squeeze it on. Like I said, that just needs to hold itself in there, so it is just glued in place. Okay, it's been a few days. This is now totally dry. Now, my pattern piece that I had, my block, was something I made before I had an actual pattern to do this. I know, that's doing it in the wrong order. But now that I realize that this is too big, I'll be able to adjust it from here. I'll still be able to use this one, but I'll let you guys know what size it needs to be to come out right. But to use this one, I just cut a piece off the top where it was too long. And when I did that, I left a mark in the block. So now I know that I just need to, in the future, line that straight edge of my pouch top up with that line when I shape it, or trim it to it. I usually make these things oversized and then trim them down. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. I'll probably make my pattern piece a little closer after this one, so that I can then make something a little bit closer to shape and not have to worry about trimming as much. Now, the block that I used was 3 inches by 3 inches with a rounded side. I would suggest about 2 7/8 or 2 3/4 wide. And then from the top down to the very longest part of the center, about 2 1/4 down. And it's still going to be about 1 inch thick. I rounded out the edges with a sander, matched these edges up, and of course, like I said, it has a kind of a round shape. I think I just did that by using a jar lid or something similar. You know, like a cap off of a can or something to make that round in. Whatever fit that particular size. But yeah, so 2 1/4 down, a little bit less than 3 inches wide, inch thick. And bonus points if we do it without cutting our fingers. Okay, then we have our pouch front. It is going to be just a little bit different shape and a little bit smaller than our back piece of our pouch. And I did that on purpose. I left this just straight-sided, whereas the example I was working from had it narrowed down a little bit when it reached this. And that's so I can just go ahead and stitch this on and then trim this back piece to match these edges. Sand them, grind them, whatever I want to do, and finish up the edges afterwards. So yeah, this is actually a little bit wide. Again, I'm probably going to adjust my pattern and make it just a little bit closer in shape so that in the future I don't have to trim off as much. Let's go ahead and get this dyed and finished. Oh, you know what? I should bevel that edge first. Let's put a little bit of beveling on that before I forget. Probably gonna have to re-dye these edges later after we get them all fit together, but for now, doesn't hurt to have some dye on them. There might be a few spots if it stays. Never know. These edges we do want to dye. Okay, let's put some finish on this. And just like the other pieces, I'm just using modern finish on it. I'm not going to bother coming up with a historical wax-based finish. I am going to finish it on the inside as well as the outside. Not for any durability's sake, but actually because it stiffens the leather up more when you finish it with an acrylic finish on the inside. Okay, now let's go ahead and put our button stud in here. This is a rivet back style button stud instead of a screw back. Just my preference. I think, of course, it's also probably more historically accurate in a lot of ways. But it's pretty much you drop it in an anvil, put the rivet through, and then just drive it down with a mallet. And of course, using a rivet setter helps. And you can kind of dome it in a little bit. But yeah, that's all there is to that. A little further in than I normally would because I'm going to be trimming quite a bit off of this. But yeah, we'll go ahead and start a stitching groove around the edge here. Yeah, that's about where I want it to be. So we got a line to play with. And I'm going to punch the holes through this outer piece with the pricking iron, or stitching chisel. Diamond hole chisel. I've heard different names for it. But then I'll have nice evenly spaced holes on the front. And when I go to stitch it all together, I'll just use an awl to punch through the back piece as I'm stitching. And I can get it all lined up nice and neat that way. Alright, now a wee bit of glue. The binder clips to hold it in place while we stitch it. Just to make life a little bit easier. Binder clips probably won't stay on while I'm stitching because they'll get in the way. But they'll hold it while the glue dries a little bit here. Okay, noticed while I was putting the glue on that, well, I didn't stitch these pieces. So I grabbed the awl real quick and punched some holes and started stitching. It's not a huge deal because you can always go back and apply the glue again. And kind of freshen it up. And actually, with this barge cement, it can make it really stick well if you put down a coat of glue, let it dry, and then put another coat on before you put the pieces together. So, not a big deal, just a little bit annoying. More glue on my fingers. Should have remembered to do it before then. Okay, now let's see if this sticks or if I need to redo the glue. Barge cement, of course, you always, like at most contact cements, it works best when it actually looks dry. So I think we're probably about good. Oh yeah, oh, it's good and solid. So, don't even have to reapply the glue. We're just gonna stick that on there. We got our pieces all set the way they need to be. Clamp it and let it dry a little while, and I'll come back and stitch it together. Well, for the next little while here, we're just going to be stitching. It's just going to be punch a hole with the awl, and then needle and thread. And I am just using the traditional 2-needle saddle stitching here. Oop. Bumped my camera. And again, I could probably do this with my sewing machine. As a matter of fact, I know I could do this with my sewing machine. But I'm doing this with a linen thread to be more accurate. So, hand stitching is the way to go. I wanted to slap these together like costume quality, I guess I could call them. Then, yeah, I could throw them together on my machine really quick like this. I'd be probably already done stitching it. And of course, like always, I shouldn't have to tell people this, but I've seen so many people do otherwise. You just need to backstitch a few stitches to lock your stitching in. Don't tie any knots or anything silly like that. Just do a little bit of backstitching. It's easy to do, it's simple, and it actually holds way better and holds up a lot longer. So yeah, just 2 or 3 holes back. Both threads. And it'll lock it all into place. So, that's all we've got for our stitching. We do have to trim this and grind and finish the edges, but otherwise, our little pouch just about done. Okay, well, let's finish some edges. Probably not. Again, how much you do of this is kind of up to you because I'm not sure how well finished the originals were. Not sure if anybody really knows because, again, it varied probably from one person to the next, one manufacturer to the next, and of course they were mass produced by many different manufacturers. And that wasn't necessarily something they were worried about. And of course, it's surviving examples. Well, they've been around so long. It'd be hard to tell. They probably all look pretty smooth now, or completely worn out. One of the two. Just depending on how well kept and handled they were. Probably go a little higher on that. But anyway, gonna make a few adjustments, but that's pretty much it. Little cat box.